am Valentina Fratu, in-depth psychologist and psychosynthesis practitioner. And this is my project about expanded state of consciousness, where I explore the mysteries and the science behind human consciousness and what does it really mean to evolve. And it's my absolute honor to introduce Kia, a beautiful woman, soul, and a person who really has a profound effect on my journey, on my life. She's a renowned yoga teacher, the founder of Radiant Body Yoga. She holds numerous yoga teacher trainings. She comments on the Asian texts and holds the community and shares so much, her wisdom in many ways you can see on her site. And how it happened with me, actually, a few years ago, my husband brought me and like the glow, and he said, you need to do this, you will like it. And I tried your lesson, your practice. I did yoga before, but I was like really hooked. It so much resonated with me that I still do every morning, almost every morning. And every time I find, it's not a question for me. I don't have to motivate myself or something. It's really the day that, and I'm not the person, it's not very typical for me because I love my way actually in the things. But your presence, it's so expensive, yeah. And it's really not only my body stretches, of course it stretches, but first of all, my heart stretches, my mind stretches, and my consciousness is really expanding. So for me, it's not a question that I discuss the topic I research, expanded state of consciousness with you, and it's really, really privilege and precious time to to discuss something that is dear to my heart with the person who holds such a special place in it. And I understand that you don't know even about my existence, but I'm really just happy to share it with you, the story, because it's really what you do. It's really miraculous.
Thank you so much, Valentina. It's so lovely to hear that story. And I'm always just in awe of the power of these practices, that they work, that there's this aspect of all of us that's just waiting to be birthed. And what we need are just the right tools to birth it, to bring ourselves into an energetically elevated, coherent state so that we can access, right, this kind of inner reservoir of inspiration, truth, greater levels of awareness.
I can speak a lot about how I feel, but I'm really here to listen and to explore your view and your story. And my first question, what opened the door for you into like so-called transcendent and expanded states? Maybe you remember your first experience when you felt connection, to something deeper, to something greater. So what was the moment in your journey that called you?
I feel like I always had a sense of something greater. When I grew up in a lot of nature, wild land, and I spend a lot of time in nature with animals. It was a large ranch-style farm with sheep, cows, horses, everything like that. And I always felt this connection to something greater than me. I felt like I wasn't alone. Even though I would spend a lot of time alone, I didn't feel like I was alone. So that stayed with me until my teenage years. I think then moving, I sort of lost a little bit of that connection, but I found it through yoga. Then I found it through this practice of bringing me back into connection with self and then experiencing really deep, profound states after doing particularly Kriya, Kundalini Kriyas, that changed me, and that was a hook. Then I was like, oh, this works. Now I have
Happened instantly, Kia, or it was some gradual process?
it's been gradual in terms of my sensitivity. In my teenage years, I wasn't so comfortable in myself. I dissociated a lot, so I wasn't in my body. It wasn't until I started doing Ashtanga yoga that I came back into my body. Then I had to learn the language of subtlety. What does energy feel like? How do I move my uh, awareness inside my body, not just in my muscles, but in the space of my body? How do I begin to harness the power of my mind? Those things all came stage by stage by stage through what has actually been a very long and dedicated path. And so, yeah, it wasn't there right away.
But it's somehow connected to the states you experienced when you were younger. You know, this when you were in nature and when you were much more little kid. It has some connection to
It
this
definitely
experience.
has some connection. Yes. Yes. I feel like I was always aware that there was a presence greater than me. I was always aware. I would talk to that presence when I was a child. And so now it's the same. I'm aware of a presence greater than me. I'm in contact with that presence. The practices help me to establish and stay in that kind of intimacy with this higher reality, with a different state of consciousness. So it's very much there, and it was very much there. But I think in the stressful times of my teenage years, I didn't feel it. I got disconnected from it. I had to be reacquainted with it. Yeah.
And in your view, what we're really talking when you tell these transcendent states or higher states, is it really heightened or it's very, on the contrary, very essential, a bit of both? What term do you use? Because, you know, I speak to different people and everyone name it because there is no name actually, yeah, for it. How do you name it? How you feel it's more close to you? What words you use?
I think it's an expanded awareness. I speak to it as a different state of consciousness. And I think that's because if we have a very narrow bandwidth of awareness and we can only see a little part of reality, then our consciousness is confined to this part of reality. But when we have greater awareness, now our consciousness is reflecting that greater awareness. So is it awareness? Is it consciousness? I think awareness could be like the knowing quality of consciousness. So when you're more expanded, you feel more connected. Your perception of yourself, your perception of reality, your perception of possibility is very different. And I feel like for so many of us who don't have an innate spiritual connection, who are very much in our three-dimensional reality of this is how life works, and very enmeshed in beliefs that we've ancestrally that's been passed down, our perception of reality gets very small. And I
Mhm.
think we live very much in the idea that we're separate from everyone and everything else. So I need to take care of my own needs. I need to, I need to compete and fight and do everything I need to do so that I'm okay. And I think when we begin to expand ourselves more and we begin to see and relate to the interconnectedness of all of life, then
Mhm.
that feeling of being so separate, so isolated starts to be released. And we really tune into how connected we all are. And then I think there's that that expansion that comes, that movement from very me-centric, I'm in life for me, what do I get for me, for my family, for my this, and then we start to shift and we begin to perceive life from, we're all connected. Everything I do sends a ripple out that affects everybody. And if we're all so connected, then how can we all grow and gain from every situation? And so our thoughts, our words, our actions shift to reflect the awareness and state of consciousness that we're holding. So for me, the practices are about getting out of stress hormones. They're about changing our energetic state so that our energy is not contracted and diminished. It's about shaking us up from the inside out so we begin to release some of the old patterns and ways of thinking. It's about creating a conscious process of self-reflection. Well, is this really true for me? Do I really believe that? Is that really the way that I want to walk through life? And then starting to correct ourselves so that we can walk more freely. I feel like maybe at the heart of all yoga is the understanding that we are 100% responsible for our experience of life. And so how do we change our experience? We have to change from the inside out. We can change location, we can change jobs, we can change partners, we can keep changing everything on the outside and still be having the same feeling on the inside. So we have to go inside. We have to change some of our core beliefs so that they match the way we want to be in life and the experiences we want to have, right? We have to go in and we have to begin to face some of our deep fears, some of our long-held resentments, traumas, and be able to take the steps to move beyond. For me, the yoga practices empower us to do that because they shift our energetic state. And if I've been in an energetic state where I'm just thinking, poor me, life is hard, bad things always happen, I never no one will love me, whatever our version is, we just keep creating the same and we want to change, but we don't know how to change. For me, the yoga practice helps us to change very quickly because it changes our energetic state. So the hypnosis of a certain mental, emotional state is lifted and we're like, I can breathe again, I can feel again, I can see again, I can be inspired again. That's what the practices bring really, in essence. And that's why we can change so quickly, right? As you were explaining, you've been practicing every single day. I think once we get that hit and we realize, oh, my poor body has been caught, trapped by my way of thinking and feeling. And then when I liberate my energy, my body starts to upregulate, my brain upregulates, everything upregulates, and suddenly I'm having a new experience of life. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so because I'm really into psychology and everything, but what I experience during practices is that you really enforce your core, like your essence, and some things they just go out by themselves. You don't have to, to dig every trauma you have. You just enforce your light, your energy, like you said. You enforce something greater than you.
I
It's
really love that reflection. And yes, I feel like you're absolutely right. You build your light, so much of what isn't at the same vibration falls away.
yeah.
Then all you're left with is a certain habitual way of thinking, which can re-stir up the emotional response. But once you start to raise your vibration, your frequency state, and then you begin to work to just gently train your mind to stay in your chosen focus, I think that's when, the quantum leaps happen where suddenly you really are not the same person that you used to be. And there's not really even traces. You think to yourself, wow, that was me. But now I'm just thinking, feeling, existing in a very different way.
And if we are talking about these states and trying to define them somehow, sometimes it's also very helpful to define what is not transcendence or what is not expanded states. What can be illusion of expansion, vice versa, like true expansion, true state. Because where is big light, there is also like big shadows. And also one of the aims of my project is to to give some navigation in this, because it's really not easy in many cases to distinguish and to understand, especially when you start the way you start to feel something like, wow, wow. But sometimes it's, according to according to my experience, it's not the truth yet. So can you reflect on it? How to distinguish?
Well, I think for one, it's like we can't just think our way into a greater expanded consciousness. We have to experience it. So we have to do the practices, the work that changes our energy, because just trying to do it on the level of mind, it's like the yogis speak to that like you're trying to stop a hurricane by blowing into it. So by trying to change just on the level of mind is frustrating at best. And we could fantasize that we've changed, but not have changed. It's got to come through our experience. And then how do we initiate that experience? Well, we have to practice, we have to move, we have to breathe, we have to invest time into that shift and change. I think a true expansion that comes from experience does not come with the delusion of grandeur of self that that some may fall into, because if you're truly changing at the elemental energetic level, then that change is affecting all levels of your consciousness. With that change comes such an expansion of your own self-compassion, your own self-love, that it's very hard to have a feeling of grandeur. What I will say, though, is that yoga is a holistic practice. It's mind, body, energy, soul. All of those have to be engaged to access true freedom and a feeling of fulfillment in life. What that means to me is, as it's stated in one of the yogic texts, that full yoga, full complete yogic action includes this idea of discipline, of tending to your own inner sacred fire, building your vitality, clearing through the inner blocks to you perceiving things clearly. It involves a dedicated process of self-reflection, study of self. And if we don't have that self-reflection, we can get caught in egoic traps. The self-reflection keeps us honest with our own self and our experience. And then the third part is this awareness of a higher reality. When we really begin to delve into yogic practices, we start to understand that the ego mind is just one part of the mind. It's what we might call the acquired mind, all of the programming and perceptions that have been given to us in our childhood. But underneath all that is this very clear, pristine state of consciousness. So how do we access that? We need to do the practice. We need to be in a process of self-reflection. And we also need to understand that in order to change, we have to change on all these levels. And the mind, as the yogis say, is the hardest part of us to adjust. So we have to begin to be aware of unhelpful thoughts, helpful thoughts, all the negative ways we put ourselves down, all the negative ways we might put other people down so we feel better. And we need it to take responsibility for how we're thinking. And one of the powerful things I learned in this process is that we actually have to protect our own mind from negativity. We have to protect that pure, clear mind that is underneath all of the acquired beliefs and programming. We have to protect it from negativity. And so that means another level of really radical self-honesty, to be able to see, I'm judging someone. I'm judging myself. I'm in a mode of self-hatred. I'm resenting somebody else. To be able to make a choice in that moment. I'm going to make a change and focus my attention somewhere else. What I've learned in that process, when we really decide to start to work with our mind, we develop such a huge compassion, because we understand, wow, this living in the light of truth, this living in the way that I really want to be showing up is hard, because my mind is so negatively programmed towards judgment, towards blame, towards shame, towards feeling guilty, towards self-hatred, that it takes a decided effort to move the mind towards a healthy place. And when we do that process ourselves, I think we can really look at somebody else that we might normally judge. And rather than looking at them in judgment, we can actually look at them with compassion and feel like, wow, that person must really be suffering to show up in that kind of way. And it changes the way we're viewing life. It's no longer us against them, me against them. It's, oh, we're in this together. And this human condition and human conditioning is intense to break through. It's really possible to break through it. And the more effort we give to it, the more we receive from within ourselves. I think the more fluid, the more ease in our life, the more we're loving, the more joy is in our life, all of it. So yoga itself, I think if we apply all the different limbs, if you like, all the different aspects of yoga at once, we really have a whole toolbox to liberate ourselves. If we're just, what we love to do in the West is isolate all these different parts. Here's asana, here's your pranayama, here's your meditation, here's your lifestyle piece. If you're just isolating and doing any one of those, you're not getting the full effect, and you're not going to get the full possibilities that are available when you are using all of these different tools. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I'm remembering I make, for example, 30-minute classes, in many cases. Like I do my practice, for example, once a week, like long one. But for me, it's also, and I wonder in these 30 minutes, I have all of this. I mean, I work with my body, I do breath, I do meditation, like it's, and I feel very complete. And this was my question, because for me it was like a short way, and I'm a mom of 3 kids, and for me 2.5 hours, it's almost impossible. No, I know that if we set priorities, but in general, like these 30-minute practices, they really gave me opportunity to practice each day. And this was also one of my questions. So can a person devoting like just not maybe his whole life, but sometime during his day, be there, and get this freedom and to change and to break through?
100%. 100% it doesn't, because what we're speaking to is not just what happens on the mat. What happens on the mat is where we create a state change, so that maybe I woke up and maybe I was grumpy, maybe I was feeling sorry for myself, maybe I felt overwhelmed by all the things I had to do. But then I got on my mat and I just spent 30 minutes, as you described. I moved my energy. I rose, I accessed a different state of consciousness. And, uh, and so now from that place, I'm seeing things differently. I'm aware that I want to walk through the rest of my day in a particular way. So I can do that in 30 minutes. Now the process continues. Now I'm stepping out, and I step into my kitchen and the kids are running around and my husband's frustrated, and now I recognize, oh, I have a choice. Am I going to react? Am I going to spin out with them? Because I could lose my state I just gained through my practice that quickly. Or I could be aware enough that I go, wow, this chaos right now. I'm going to just breathe. I'm not going to react. I'm going to do my best to see what people need in this moment. I'm going to respond from that place. And so, great, now you just took your practice and you made a whole other level of progress. And then it keeps going through the day. So, yoga is the practice of yoga. Once is a moment by moment awareness. I am choosing right now how I want to show up. I'm choosing how I want to react. I'm choosing what my next thing is. And if we're not in that process of conscious choice, then it's the subconscious, unconscious mind that's driving. I'm reacting here. I'm feeling insecure here. I'm overprotecting here, and it goes on. So, what we need every day is a touch point that connects us to our true state, our true inner state, that sense of just presence, pure presence, awareness, and our remembrance of who we really are and how we want to be in life. Then we get to take that remembrance forward through our day. And then that's where the progress gets made. So it's not about just the event on the mat. It's how we take what we're learning about ourselves there and we implement it in our day-to-day lives. Yeah.
And yeah, I really resonate. I think this is truly expansion. And you all the time, like when you're finishing the practice, you all the time remind that take all your experience here to your life. And I think a lot of people think that yoga is just you did something and that's all. Finished, your fitness is finishing. But this is really here the work starts actually, because in yoga it's quite easy to feel like certain state, yeah. And here the question, Kia, for example, at the beginning of my path, for me it was kind of even, you know, the contrast, because in the practice you access the state, you feel really like you like you have no doubts, but then the lives go on, and this feeling is already not so easy to maintain. And at once I felt like it's like pisses me off, yeah, on the contrary, and only with practice, yeah, I start to gather back. But how also you guide your students in this integration and
I love this question. And you know what? It is an integration, and that's the key part of it. It is an integration. So when we practice, we want to allow ourselves enough time to integrate and what I would call stabilize in the state we've just created. And then I think taking the time to commit to how we want to walk through the rest of the day is really important. It's like the process of really tuning into how we want to be, how we want to walk through the day, how we want to respond to life's challenges, As we do that, at the end of a practice, for example, we're rewiring our mind. We're already creating the circumstance so that it's easier to make that choice as opposed to the unconscious choice. So that's one part of it. I think we want to live to a vision of who we really are. Otherwise, it's the unconscious program of the past that will keep fueling our choices and decisions. That's one part. The other part is that whenever we are in a process of evolution, it's a fluctuating process. We gain and then we drop a little. We gain and then we drop a little until we learn to stabilize at a different state of consciousness. Maybe this was our baseline before we rose up, but then we found ourselves falling down, and we keep doing this until we learn how to stabilize up here instead of here. And then it's an ever progressive journey. We're just continuously learning how to access a different level of refinement and being kind and compassionate with ourselves along the way, because it can be hard to hold that state of consciousness that we feel on the mat when we're out in the stresses of life and there's so much being demanded of us. So we recognize, I fell from grace. I didn't mean to, but I fell from grace. Taking a moment and asking ourselves, okay, if I got to do that again, how would I do it differently? And you think about, visualize yourself doing it differently. Notice how it would feel in your body if you made a different choice. And then you get to, again, wire that possibility into your neurology as you're visualizing it. And then you get to say, okay, I forgive myself. I let it go. I'll do better next time. And so to me, this is a major part of being able to take what we experience on the mat and translate it into living in greater awareness and less reactivity, especially important when we're engaging with loved ones, where our triggers can be, easily provoked.
So you think it's possible to be in expanded state of conscious, more or less, not more or less, but like stable, in stable expanded states? Is it real that we like can be in this state?
It is real. It definitely is real. And all of us, because we're constantly in a state of growth, there's always going to be that possibility of 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 slipping and being challenged. So then it's not, am I going to be challenged, but it's how quickly will I be able to catch myself if I, say, react unconsciously. So it's about catching yourself more and more and more and more, so that again, it isn't that we're going to walk through life perfectly. I think that's a myth for most of us. We're going to be challenged and we're going to fall from grace, but how quickly am I going to correct myself? Maybe you have an argument with your husband and in the past it took you a week to resolve it. Well, maybe you say something unkind and then you recognize it immediately and you immediately apologize and you can move on. So it's, again, not so much that we won't maybe fall from grace, but that we'll catch ourselves much more quickly because we'll have that degree of awareness and commitment to self-responsibility. I acted out of integrity. Catch it, recorrect, move on, as opposed to, I acted out of integrity. I did it again, bad me, this is horrible, or, which then just creates another sort of a devolution cycle as opposed to an evolution cycle. So, and then, I do know people who seem to exist in a more consistent state of grace, for sure. Wavering You know, whereas somebody's highs and lows might be like this, I think once you're super stable, your highs and lows are much smaller.
Mhm. And your expansion also like becomes bigger. I mean, because when you, is it become more intense, bit more, I don't know, sharp, more clear? What happens, like, for example, with you throughout your practice? Because it's also, I think, the process of like expansion and it's endless, yeah? How you felt it in your practice?
A deeper sensitivity to myself,
Mm-hmm.
to that deep feeling, a greater self-trust, a greater self-confidence, much clearer intuition. Uh, yeah, just greater sensitivity, greater connection, greater self-love, which then expands into, you know, appreciation and gratitude and love for all those around. So all of those things, I think.
Mm-hmm. And I think the challenges become more like also more intense in, or no?
Well, I feel that perhaps if I read this correctly, perhaps in the beginning stages of our journey, because there's so much unconscious material that we haven't been looking at, and for no fault of our own, we just didn't know how to, or we weren't kind of aware it was there. But then once we start looking and we start to see, okay, there is a, could we call it a shadow side, or there is a, you know, there is stuff that I need to look at. I think then that once you gain a certain vitality and a certain capacity, that that the part of you, the soul, maybe you could say it, that wants to grow, that wants to evolve, is going to start to reveal a lot of the unconscious matter. And so we might feel at the beginning like we're taking 3 steps forward, but then it feels like we take a couple of steps back because there's a lot that we have to process through. But I feel that once you hit a certain point, that is different. It's different. It's much smoother riding. There isn't so much coming up. You're always going to have the next level of growth because this is an ever expansive universe. There's always going to be more that you can find and reveal about yourself. And I think that the timing on that is going to be unique to each and every person, you know? Um, I went through a massive healing the year before last, and it was ripe. It was time. It was a whole other level that I hadn't addressed from childhood years. And that was just the moment where karmically you could say it ripened, where I was ready to hold that next level of space for myself. And it was very rapid and extraordinary in the long run. So we never know.
Mhm.
But I don't think it's always that way. It's just at the beginning, it can feel a little bit like, yeah, it's all that stuff we haven't looked at. Suddenly we get to look at it.
Yeah, but I mean, like the more we expand our awareness, the more things we can see, and we see all, not only like the beauty part, we also see like the shadow parts and just the way it is. And that's, and we need to, and maybe we grow the capacity to address it. And I'm wondering if it's like never ending process of meeting something, some shadows and everything, or maybe, you know, at some level you just, I don't know, you do other things. I don't know, maybe I'm not there. I still meet my shadows and everything.
I mean, I think the ego, the acquired mind, the egoic identity is so, it's so tight. It's so we're so comfortable in it, you know, that we're going to be faced by elements of it until we're not. And in the yoga tradition, the moment where you're not faced by the challenges of your egoic acquired mind, acquired self, that's when you go into samadhi or oneness consciousness. And that's, that's a dedicated path. So I think for most of us who are very much in the world, we're active in the world, and maybe we're practicing and we're continuously seeking to refine ourselves, I think we're going to be challenged because the ego is sneaky and it's going to want to keep control in certain ways. But the more we learn to trust the inner voice, the more we begin to walk through life, not from a perspective of what's in this for me, but what's in this for we, how may I serve, how can I be showing up in a way that's beneficial to all, then I think the ego gripping is lessened, and then our suffering in life and around our self is lessened. And there's just more joy, more ease, more creativity, a greater power of choice as to what we engage in, what we don't engage in, less judgment about what everyone else is doing because you're focusing on what you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it all makes sense. It's just I'm just enjoying. Not sure where should I interrupt because you are going your way. For example, in psychosynthesis, where the method that I resonate very much, and the founder of it, he was actually in love with yoga and took so much from it, from the philosophy. He tells about the exchange between our personal self, like the one that operates in this world, and the higher self. And it's like a very beautiful concept. He calls it like the third breathing. And it's not only that we get some inspiration from like higher consciousness and reveal it through life, but that also the higher consciousness is learning through us. It's like all the time like this exchange, and it's very remind me like what you again that what you transmit in the practice. Does it sound familiar to you?
Yes, it does sound familiar to me. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And I think what you were talking about before is that we don't have to be like the monks and like to live our life, but we can be in our life, and this is actually the path, maybe even more challenging than just to be on one side, but trying somehow to transfer what we get into the practice, because this feeling, what you get, you can't you know you can you really feel, you really experience that there's something within you, and then you start to like, it's like a reference point. I mean, like, am I in line with this what I felt during the practice in my life, in my doings? And I think that also shift your perspective.
Yes, it does. I love the way that you put that. It's exactly it. It's exactly it. As we practice, it starts to shift the way we're looking at ourselves and our lives. And I think that if we approach it gently and we approach it with lightness of being, then we don't just sort of take on another task in life that feels like heavy and a lot of work. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. It can be joyful. I'm going to practice. I'm going to see, and start to observe when you practice. Okay, what you want to eat starts to shift because your body's in a different level of balance. You start to see possibilities you didn't see before. You start to see yourself in a new light. And I think we can journey that way, holding it all lightly, especially in a world where there's so many demands being made of us. And then, every now and again, I think what naturally happens, at least this is what happened for me, is I started to touch on something in myself that was so profound and so deep that I knew that I needed to give it more attention. So then I would do deep dives, like spend a week in really deep practice and meditation and come out of it and feel very different. And then I would just cruise for a while through my life again, just doing the minimum and, you know, feeling and acting and sensing things differently. And then I get to a point where I'm like, oh, I got to do another deep dive. I really, I feel that there's more, and I'm kind of just flowing through life in this way, and the color from life's fading a little bit. And then I go in and I up level again and I go back into the world and I'm changed. So I think that's also a way that we can approach our own transformational process. And I look at quantum physics a lot, and I look at the life of mystics, and I look at the ancient yogic texts and the other ancient mystical texts that speak so much to the quantum level of being, of different levels of possibility that humans can access than just what we've decided as, humanity is what's possible. And I want to lean in towards that quantum level of being. And it totally reflects the yogic path that as we think and as we feel is dictating our experience of life. So therefore, I want to turn my lens inward enough that the change that I'm seeking is happening here, and then I'm effortlessly experiencing it in the outer world, as opposed to trying to fix the outer world to show up so that I feel comfortable on the inside. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sounds like alchemy. Yeah, like real, real
Yes.
mystic. And okay, you're all the time like even in your practices, you all the time blend science and the ancient wisdom. And what really inspires me. So at this point of your life, how you understand what happens when we enter these transcendent states, this expanded states of conscious. Um, do you get some scientific explanations how you understand what's happening with us?
I understand it from my own experience, which is not so easy to translate. But there's a lot of studies in the University of San Diego happening right now on what is happening to somebody when they're having a spiritual experience. So, tracking people who have had spiritual experiences, through breath and yoga practice. And what they're showing is that when we have a spiritual experience, there's a dissolving of the ego, of the egoic experience, which is creating a quantum shift in the energy of our body. Brainwave state shifts and goes into a much different state faster, and energy in the body is ramped up. Your gut biome changes, your blood chemistry changes, your glandular system upregulates. There's an enormous shift that happens when one has like a mystical experience, a dramatic change in their consciousness state. So, so I think it can be an incredible process of healing. What they're showing is possible even for relatively novice meditators is pretty extraordinary. That it's something about the personality construct, the way that we've limited ourselves through our perceptions of self and reality that creates the opportunity for dis-ease, distance from ease, disconnect. And that the moment we can really upregulate and access a transcendental state of consciousness where we're not ego bound anymore, then these massive changes can happen on all levels of your being. So that's exciting to me that there's enough studies being done right now that reflect these mystical experiences or just elevated experiences. And I think that's important because we're so curious on a scientific level as humanity right now. So if we have a scientific language, it can be easier for people to jump on board than a language of the saints and sages, you know?
But you said that you also find it in ancient texts, like
Mm-hmm.
some analogists, maybe they don't use the word quantum, but you find something similar.
100%. We're either talking about energy and consciousness, or we're talking about Shiva and Shakti, you know, or Purusha, Prakriti. These are all terms in the yoga tradition that are the same as consciousness and energy, but in the scientific language, that's what it's called. So it's all there, just different language.
But it's beautiful that now it starts to, unite, because I was also once in some conference in London, I think, and there were like Nobel Prizes scientists explaining Tantra, Tantric Buddhism. And it was like, wow, because really people from, the scientific world, meet the spirituality. I think this is what really excites me also.
That's great.
Okay. um, what else I wanted to ask about? You speak so much about love, and I actually call this conversation like the portal of love, yeah, because I really feel it in your practice. It's infused in your practice everywhere. So how, and I believe this like the base and integral force of everything, if the words can explain this. So how you guide your students through this portal, how, what you can tell about this? Because actually even the name of my like lab, yeah, it's like evolve, and there is love, like Eva love. So like I really believe that this is the force that make us evolve. Just maybe you can see like tell about your perspective on it, because I really feel it like the base of all the practice that is, you transmit in the world. I don't know
Oh,
if it's easy
it's
to
it's not easy, is
comment
it?
on this.
Because it's such a subtle force. You know, when I'm guiding practice, I'm very much tuning myself to that frequency and that experience. So it's very much that speaks through me more than anything else because I'm tuning to it. And so there's a presence, there's a feeling of the presence of connection, the presence of a full appreciation of the moment, full reverence. Perhaps my entry point to deep love is reverence, to be a little bit in awe of life and deeply grateful. Because when I'm in gratitude, there's no separation. I'm not trying to manipulate the moment to get anything else out of it. I'm just grateful and open-hearted. And to me, then that experience of, I don't know, of love, unity consciousness, that presence is is there. And then to speak to it is easier when it's just right there through the practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Also, I wish we can transfer it, because you really just, through your practice, you can really feel it all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because it is our innate essence. It's like the force of creative consciousness itself is that. So the closer we get to that, the more we feel it. And And I think that the love that we think is love is ultimately just a fraction of what love really is. And the more refined we get, the more broad our experience of love is.
Yeah.
And those people who have profound mystical experiences, they speak to love.
And how you differ between profound mystical experience and expanded states? What is
I
that?
think in a profound mystical experience, something other than is happening. You, there's just how to describe that. Something, for me, my experience is something so different than what I ever could have thought of is happening from within. And it's an absolute like explosion of light, of love, of awareness. And one is so caught in the moment. It's like you're not analyzing the moment because you're in the moment. There is no analytical mind. It's gone. There's just a experience that you're a part of. And when one has an experience like that, that's where the upregulation happens throughout all of the different body systems, because you've been so immersed in this experience that your body is that it just upregulates to show the experience that you're having on the inside, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and after this, how you integrate like more intense states? Because I can only imagine that in this like very vast states, um, then you come back again to like the time, space, and like some conditioning, um,
Yes,
and how to embody this. Because when you feel a little bit, it's easier to embody, but when you
exactly.
like this,
Well, it's one of those things, I think, that it's the same conversation about the fluctuations. You went so far, and it's perhaps changed and it sustains for a while, but then inevitably your consciousness state is engaging with the world, in a more mundane way, and it just starts to drop. It's inevitable that you can't, unless I think um, myself and everybody I've met thus far has not sustained it on that full level of absorption. You couldn't, because you're back in the world again and you're interacting, and yet you're still changed in a fundamental way, and the memory of it is there, and you're not the same person you were, but inevitably your consciousness state is going to drop slightly again. It's just,
maybe we
yeah.
need to again to do something here. Yeah, we still have so much work to do here.
Yes, and the stories of the rishis, the great seers and the sages, is that they access it and they sustain it.
Mm.
So I think learning to sustain it is the key, once you've accessed it. Yeah.
And now there is a growing interest in like accessing the state through different, shortcuts, through substances, through even sometimes not like recreational, yeah, but I mean,
Therapeutic.
therapeutic and spiritual and like ceremonies with medicine and with everything. But there are certain ways you do it, like day by day practicing. So there is this way, and there are some shortcuts. I mean, in a way, Kundalini is also a shortcut. Yeah, you can access it. But there are, so how do you, what is your perspective on still substances, I think. Yeah. And like I wouldn't say it not natural again, not to judge it, because I'm open exploring everything. For me personally, um, I'm very doubting, yeah, but I'm exploring all the views because I have, people who has profound experiences, the like people who explore this scientifically, and they have like research. So I'm addressing this to you because you, for sure, you know people, you like in this topic much more than any of us. So how can you relate to this? What is your opinion?
I used to explore with different substances before I started to do Kundalini Yoga. From the moment I started to do Kundalini Yoga, I recognized that it was an upgrade. And I recognized that the experiences that I was having were creating such a subtle shift that I didn't want to disturb that by doing any level of other psychoactive substance. And I was on a progressive route to healing that felt sustainable to me and did not create the sense of needing something from outside of myself other than the breath. Because what I notice often within those who are choosing medicine journeys is that there's profound experience and shift that can be with them forever, which is fantastic. However, it can set up a subtle level of craving, of feeling like that's where they're going to get their experience from. And so I see people going back again and again and again and again. And for me, I feel like the progressive self-generated journey that we go on through the Kundalini-based practices, pranayama, meditation, is a much more holistic method for sustainable evolution, as opposed to glimpsing it, but then not knowing how to get back there without the substance. Maybe there is benefit in the glimpse of it. But then if one doesn't have a practice and a process that one can implement on a daily basis, then how is one to get back there? Or how is one to get there? And maybe that there is just one glimpse of an infinite number of possible realities. But if we do our progressive journey, we're going to see so many more. So it's interesting. I'm not black or white. I think it could, some people are helped. Personally, I knew the moment I started practicing Kundalini practices that I had no need for that anymore, that what I was receiving and experiencing inside myself was the thing that I had been seeking my whole life. It was like, there I am. Ah. And then everything else felt like an exhausting search. Whereas here I am. I don't need to seek for it. It's here. And I really trust, the yogis say we can't rush our evolution. So even if you push and you get there through the psychoactive experience, if you're going to reach that state in a sustainable way, you still got to work for it in a steady step-by-step process.
And actually what happened to me when I started Kundalini, I stopped searching actually. This is what I just wanted to practice, to see, to explore, but I stopped searching like really, and I search also a lot. I didn't try much, but I was looking for more maybe in this like mind field of psychology, different approaches and everything. But then I just, yeah. And I think I think there is a book of altered state, I think it's called, and they say that this glimpse, that we experience is nothing compared to when we gradually build up. It's much more higher that we can experience when we have this glimpse. But again, everyone is on different way, different, circumstances and situations, and for someone it can be a way. What helps you to stay in touch, in connection with this love, with this higher self, with this true you? I think this is like, I think the last question, and maybe it also will help the people who are on their journeys to relate somehow to their lives. What helps you to keep this connection? Sometimes more, sometimes less, but still.
Well, daily practice number one. So that's that touch point to really connect in and feel and be in tune with myself. The other thing is to really follow, Dr. Joseph Campbell said this, who wrote the book The Hero's Journey, and many others. He studied mythology and all the different global traditions. And he had this saying, follow your bliss. And I believe that when we follow our bliss, when we follow the things that really bring us joy and happiness, that we create a lot of good fortune in our life. There's a lot of auspiciousness when we follow our bliss, because there's an innate intelligence in our being that's from our soul, that's from our energy, our body. And if we can trust that and allow ourselves to follow the things that bring us great joy, then life starts to unfold in a really precious way. And when we're trusting what we're feeling from within, the things that bring us joy, and we see then that as we follow our joy, wonderful things are manifesting for us, I think then it just keeps building upon itself. So I try to do that even in my day-to-day life. Now, of course, sometimes there's deadlines. We have to sit at the computer and work, even if that's not joyful in the moment. But generally speaking, what I try to do is I trust. I'm like, oh, I know I have a big writing project to do. Oh, I know I've got to go film those like 5 classes to put up on Glow or something. I'm like, but I know not to push it. I'm like, there's going to be the right moment where I'm just going to know, okay, this is the time to do that, rather than setting myself in such a rigid schedule that it takes the spontaneity and that feeling of natural, effervescent, like joy and bliss, that it takes it away. So I try to follow the next right thing for me in the moment, whilst having in the background the idea and the running of, okay, well, this does need to be done, this needs to be done, but allowing my inner spirit to guide. I love to do that. It feels like I'm so much more spontaneous. I'm so much more fun to be around. I feel so much more connected, that, that's one way to flow through life, to really enhance that. And being out in nature. If I'm ever in doubt, if I go to nature. Nature to me is the great healer, because when we're in nature, we're part of nature. When we choose to go out and walk among the trees, to walk by the ocean, to be wherever we are, and then we're interacting naturally with all these other beings, the trees, the rocks, the consciousness in the river, the ocean, and that brings us back into, I think, a coherent resonance where mind, heart start to sync, and we come into a state of remembrance, just being in nature. So those are the things that I love to do.
Yeah. Me too. And this bliss, is it kind of expanded state also? You use, actually, it's one of my favorite classes in of yours, Follow Your Bliss. And even my dog's name is Bliss. But is it the same or different thing?
I think it can be the same, it can be different. It can just be the things that are inspiring you in the moment. The energy of inspiration, the energy of excitement, the energy of joy, to follow those energies in life. And sometimes following and facing the fear, because under fear is excitement. So, you know, just learning to hold that. Like, I think maybe when we follow our bliss, underneath is a little bit of fearlessness, because we're not doing the known. We're
Yeah.
not following whatever rules society has. We're more like, you know what, I'm going to make my own rules. And I'm just going to follow what feels like the next right thing.
Yeah, and maybe this is the flip side of even the fear is bliss and excitement. Yeah, they are just like this.
Exactly. Yeah. And when we're not afraid of being afraid, then then there's nothing to hold us back anymore.
Yeah, and what I also love so much about your classes and about your energy, it's really like you take this, you know, too much seriousness away. I mean, you're very deep, but at the same time, like you have this lightness and the sense of, I don't know, humor, not humor, but it's like very um, light and joyful. Yeah, in a way, and at the same time, so deep. So that's,
Thank you. I love to share. So I love yoga. I love sharing. I get excited. And I do believe that despite some of the intensity of which I shared in this session, I think that that fun is a big part of this journey. Yeah. So thank you. What a pleasure.